Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Through Review 638. Today we're going to take a look at The River. This is a new game coming out from Days of Wonder. It is a 2 to 4 player game. It's got some interesting kind of Euro style mechanics, but it plays very, very quickly. You could probably call it a filler game, but there's kind of, I don't know, filler is a tough kind of term to sort of apply to a game, but it does play very quickly. You can play this in 30 to 45 minutes. Definitely quicker on the quicker end of that with the 2-player game, and even with a 4-player game, you can get this done in about 45 minutes. So let's take a look at the mechanics, and then I'll come back and tell you what I think. Okay, I've got everything set up here. They have a really long central board, so I'll kind of be moving around there as I go over everything. You can see each player will get a board of their own, so we'll just take a peek down here like so. Everybody gets a little boat. So this is the green player starts with 4 workers on their boat, and they're going to put 1 worker on this particular spot there. Everybody's got a spot like that. And then before you start the game, you're going to do kind of a pre-game draft. You'll put out a certain number of tiles here based on the number of players. Everybody will get a chance to pick one and put it on their board. Now it is worth noting that all these boards, the central board here and this one, are double-sided. This is the 2-player side. You'll see there'll be less of these spots on the 2-player side. And then there's also a certain amount of spaces and things up here, as well as the number of resources will change based on the number of players. So you can see even on this side of the board, with 3 players you'll have 10 wood, and with 4 players you'll have 13 wood in that space, and so on. So you're going to play the game round over round, and the game is going to end in one of 2 ways. Once one player has filled up all of their 12 tile spots or all of their bonus token spots. That will then signal us the end of the round. You keep playing the rest of the round, and then you're going to total up the score. The start player will get this little token here, and then you're going to have some cleanup at the end of the rounds, but you can actually take this and go first on the next round, which I'll show you in a sec. So on your turn, you're going to just do some actions here with these particular workers there. But before you take your action, you can actually do a swap of goods. So you can see there's 3 types of resources in the game. At any time, you can swap any of these 3 or 3 of any combination of these to get one of these turkeys, which is food. Now these are effectively wild resources. So if you want, at the start of your turn, you can swap a combination of 3 of these and then take and grab one of these food resources. So once you decide if you want to do that, then you can take an action. And so there's a few action spots on the board, which I'll show you now. So if we look over here, here is one of the main spots is taking the tiles. And you can see there are 2 spots for each player color to take a tile. So you just simply take your guy and put it there, and then you choose one of the tiles here, and then you're going to put it on your board. So let's just take, we'll take this one. I'll explain a little bit more about what these tiles do. So that's an action you can take a tile. Then if we scooch over here, you can go here if you wish, for example, and then take the start player token from whoever has it, or if you have it, you can just kind of ensure that you're going to keep it. If you go up here in this spot, you can build buildings, and the buildings are these cards over here, which I'll talk about in a minute. But if you want to build them, you got to go here and put a worker. And you can see here in this particular spot, you see this kind of infinity symbol. That means as many players as they want can go here, and there's no worker placement kind of blocking in these spots. Whereas these other spots that I showed you, of course, you are limited to having 1 worker on these spots. Now this next action here, this allows you to swap tiles on your board. So if I wanted to, for some weird reason, and I might, I could swap these 2 tiles by going to one of these spots on the board. Now, the next thing you can do, let's actually skip the resources. That's maybe the most interesting part of the game. And then we'll go over here to the buildings. So over here, you can actually reserve a building. So if I take a worker here and place that, I can go and take and keep one of these face down in front of me. You can have at most 2 of these buildings in front of you that you haven't built yet. So you can reserve 2 buildings, and once you have that, you have to build some to get them out of your hand. So getting to actually building the buildings, when you go over here and to build, you can either build one of these buildings here, and if you build a building that's in the face-up display, then you got to pay the exact number of resources. So in that case, let's say 5 brick. But if you had reserved a building, let's say we reserved this one earlier, and then we went over here to the build a spot, then I could build this one for 1 cheaper because it was in my hand. So you can do one of those 2 things, either build something face up or build something in my hand. And when I do that, I can just subtract 1 of these. So I could do 2 wood and 3 stone, or 2 stone and 3 wood, or whatever I want to do. When I build that, I'll just put that, the game tells you to put them face down, but you basically push this and you'll score those points at the end of the game. Now the other thing to note about the building cards that you do is as you build, you're going to take these bonus tiles. So the first person to build a building is going to get 6 points, and then 5, and these are all stacked down to 1. And then once those run out, then you start to take these 0 point tokens, which might be worth points if you get a special bonus tile at the end of the game. But the most important thing is once you take this tile, you're going to start to cover up these bonus spaces. And once everybody covers up their second one, they're going to then unlock this worker who's going to be able to jump on their boat, so they'll have a 5th worker, at least for a little while, that they can use. And so now let's talk about going to the resource spots. Now the resources, again, are limited. So you can see each of these 3 spots sort of has blocking. You can only have 2 spaces here. But as many people as they want can go here and get a turkey. So if I was the green player, I could go here and get a turkey. And then if I was the black player, I could go here and get a turkey. And again, everything's limited. So once all the turkeys are out, there's no reason to go there. Now, if I were to go to, for example, let's say this brick spot as the green player, I would go here and I would get X number of bricks plus 1 if I was the first person there. And if I was the second person, I would get X. What is X? So we're going to look at our board. So you're going to see how much of the particular type of resource you went to that you will generate. So you're going to count up, in this case, all the bricks. Oh, we've only got 1 brick. But remember, if we were the first person, we would get plus 1, whatever that is. So if I go down here, if I was the green player, I would get the number of bricks I produce, which in this case is 1, and then plus 1. Whereas if I had, let's say, this tile here, I'd have 2 bricks that I produced, so it'd be 2 plus 1. And if you don't do the plus 1 spot, obviously you just do the number of bricks you produce. Whereas let's say I went to the wood spot to make wood. I got 1, 2, 3 wood, and if you're the first one there, you get the bonus wood. But you need spaces to put things. That's where these barns come in. So if I got 3 wood, I'd have to have 3 barns. It doesn't matter where. I could put them all over the place if I wanted to, anywhere. So once you fill this up, if you get more resources than you can contain, you can discard resources off your board or take less resources than you could have generated. So that's kind of the gist of these. Now it's worth noting, as you start to place these tiles down, you have to place them in this sort of order following the river like so. So as you place tiles, you're going to start to cover up things. So for example, here, once I put this on top of that, I've got no more stone here that I could get. I want to try to get some other tiles that give me stone and so on. And you got to be careful about covering up your storage as well, because if I didn't have this storage and I started to cover these others up, I'll start to run out of storage. Now it's also worth noting, let's get some other tiles out here, like this. So as you place along here, you're going to cover up these spots. When you do that, at the end of the round, when you pull all your workers off, which I haven't talked about the end of the round yet, but you're going to take your workers back, and then if you've covered up any of these spots here next to the X worker, you're going to actually start to lose workers as you start to build buildings around through the course of the game, to the point where we will end up with only 1 worker. So there's some other types of tiles here in the game beyond just storing and generating resources. Like for example, this tile here, when you take this tile, you will immediately take 4 stone, and then that's it. This tile is basically done for the rest of the game. Sometimes you will get bonus point tiles here at the end of the game. So this gives you 1 bonus point for each stone production spot. That doesn't include these, but it includes anything like this that has a little circle there. So you can get up to a max of 3 points for each of those. And then this one here is a particular type of terrain. You can see all of these tiles here have kind of a terrain in the background. This is kind of the high desert, I guess you'd call it. So you would get 1 point for each of those. Now the other thing to note here is at the end of the game, in addition to the points you get from your bonus point tiles, from your buildings, and then from any of the tiles like this that you get, you're also going to be looking for the different terrain. So you can see here, here's a 2-point line there and a 6-point line there. So starting from the top, if you have matching terrain in each of these columns, up to the first 2 lines, you're going to get 2 points. So for example, this one is kind of both terrains. So it can count for mountains or forest. And then this one is forest. So I would get 2 points for this column. If I got another forest, here we go, like so, then I would get all 3, and then I would get down here and I would get 6 points. So you're kind of trying to manage your storage versus your production versus your bonus point tiles, and also where they are in terms of the terrain to try to build, and get these extra bonus points like so. So that's just the game. You're getting tiles. You're trying to build these building cards for points as well as the bonus points, and then trying to manage the resources and have enough storage for the resources, and also keeping an eye on the amount of resources that are left, because these are going to dwindle, and you're going to be trying to go after buildings with resources that are actually available and that other people maybe aren't quite as invested in. Okay, so that is the river. First, let's talk about playtime. I kind of mentioned this at the beginning. It's going to take you 30-45 minutes to play the game. Yeah, I think even with 4 players, especially once everybody's played the game one time. As far as the player count goes, that's kind of a good question. I would say I think the best player count is probably 4, because with 3 players, it almost feels like it's, I don't know. Okay, I'll say my favorite is with 4, but that's not, it's like that, not that much more my favorite. Like 2 and 3 is okay, it's good, but then 4 is like the best of the, if you're just talking about player count. So I would recommend 4, although 2 is fine and stuff. I just like the more people involved kind of taking stuff from each other, because I think that the game really wants you to do that. And so that's going to kind of lead me into my review part, is the more people have taken stuff from each other, the better. And with 4 players, that's going to happen more often. Now, in terms of like what is this game like? I mean, on one hand, I can talk out of one side of my mouth and say it's like a lot of Euro games where you do worker placement and get buildings and stuff. Like that's a thing. It's kind of a very lighter version of that kind of thing. Now, the interesting thing about it, which I haven't really seen much of, it feels familiar, but I can't put my finger on it, is the whole like placing your tiles on the board. So you have to build them in a certain order. So you're going to be covering up spaces that you have on your board printed. And also you are trying to arrange the terrain, but you're building it in a kind of a weird snake order. So you've got to sort of try to plan ahead, but somebody's probably going to take that tile that was perfect, had the right resource, and it had an extra storage on it, and it was the perfect terrain, and it was going to be next in line, and somebody else is going to take it. Or they should. So that whole kind of weird management in terms of like the order of stuff that you take and the way you're kind of line up the columns, that's different. That kind of feels neat to me. And the rest of it of how, like, when you go to a worker spot to get resources, it's based on what your board has. Because you're not really going out to that spot. You're sending a worker into this abstract place, but you're really getting those resources out of your own ground, so to speak. So that feels very different. Now, the interesting thing to me about this game is the way that it ends. Because the strongest way that it ends is, actually, I've never seen it end with the tile building, although it got close. One player got all of them except for, I think they were missing 2 on that one. So they got 10 of the tiles built. But it still ended when building the building. So if you're playing 3 or 4 player game, you just need one player to build 5 buildings, which is not difficult to do. Especially if the lower point buildings come out that don't cost as much resources. And so somebody could really chase after those low point ones and go after the bonus points, because those are significant points, at least at the start of the game. So that to me is an interesting part of the game, because you could have somebody just run right to the victory going, I'm going to build this little building at 6 points, a little building 5 extra points, a little building 4 extra points. If nobody is there, like, messing with them, that's going to end the game really fast, and that person is going to win. Like, no fooling. So you need kind of players getting in the way of what the other players are trying to do, so that nobody actually can race to that end. So I would say that's kind of a caveat with the game. You should really know that going into your first game, because if you don't, you're just going to be like, what was that? Because somebody might just do that and just race to those bonus points. But if you have people kind of blocking stuff, reserving cards, there's that. But then you're kind of giving up an action to reserve that. But again, you're reserving it so you can bill it for 1 cheaper. And so there's that kind of thing. And then, so let's say you get that out of the way, and then you still, once the game is going, and maybe nobody's really raced to a victory, you still got to watch that, because it's still easy-ish to build the buildings versus, getting all the tiles in a row. I've not seen anybody do like a rush tile strategy, because it's just, you have that sort of concern or that constraint of you trying to line stuff up and get points out of them that way. So that seems to be kind of thwart that strategy. And I haven't really seen anybody try that. I would like to see somebody try that. I never feel like I want to, but so it'd be interesting to kind of see that. But once the game kind of gets going, and again, it's only going to take you 30 minutes or so, you still got to watch. Somebody's going to be able to build, bam, bam, 2 buildings in that last round. You're like, oh no, because I had 1 turn left. I could have gotten this other, 10-point building out. Well, you shouldn't have wasted your time on that, probably. That kind of thing. So you can really get cut off at the knees. And so in a way, it kind of reminds me, this is where I come down to kind of liking the game, is it reminds me of Splendor in that way. Where in Splendor, if you've played that, you get cards, you got to pay resources for cards, you get cards, but then the cards kind of start to give you free resources. And then it's like, then you start really ramping your engine up and then you score all these big cards. This doesn't really play like that at all, but it has that feeling where you get some tiles out, you get sort of an engine going with your resources. You've reserved a couple, similar to Splendor, where you can kind of reserve some big hitters, and then you can and then just really spin up the end of the game as you get cooler tiles and you get lots of rewards and things as the game kind of moves along. And you're really trying to watch when that sort of scythe is going to come along and chop you off at the knees. So this has that really abrupt, the game's going and then it's over and you're like, oh wait, or you're the person steering it. So yeah, so it's nice because I played this with one of the family, and it's nice because it's super simple. You just place a worker, put the tile out. If I go get a resource, I look at my board and I count up those resources and then build the buildings. And that's kind of the game. You got like swapping tiles and stuff. So it's super simple, but it has that sort of extra layer of ruthlessness that is interesting in a family game. And so I think that's good. I think it's sometimes good to have a very easy kind of, yay, this is, I'm doing stuff. And then like you have this sort of like undercurrent of evil in the game. I think that's good for families, right? And then I think, if you're playing with like a seasoned gamer group, then they can get right into the evil right away and be very cutthroat about it. So it's interesting. I definitely would take a look at it. That's The River. Definitely take a look. Thanks.